All right, what is up, everybody? Will here with Schedule Fly, and this is the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast brought to you by us here at Schedule Fly. Super simple, web-based restaurant employee scheduling platform backed by legendary customer service and at a low price point. Legendary customer service, meaning things like my personal cell phone is on schedulefly.com's website on like 3 pages, and you can find me easily and call me and talk to me or text me or whatever. You'll get me on my flip phone, so call anytime. And then low price point, meaning that we haven't raised our prices in 18 years that we've been in business. So we are not venture backed. We're not owned by private equity. So we have a small team, and we just try to provide a great platform, great tool with great service and at a very affordable price. You can do a 30-day free trial at schedulefly.com anytime you want. And again, you can call me and rap about it first if you'd like. So if you're on pencil and paper or Excel, everybody from an owner to a GM, an owner who's trying to create efficiencies, reduce labor costs, GM or manager who's creating a schedule and dealing with all the schedule changes and all that comes along with that. And then, frankly, these days for employees, you're giving them an employee benefit, right? So that they want their schedule, they want everything on their phones at their fingertips all the time. And so we make that a lot easier for you if you're on pencil and paper or Excel. If you're on another product, it might be great, but you also could be paying a lot of extra money for a lot of bells and whistles you may not use. So again, give us a shot, check us out, free trial, call me, whatever. Schedulefly.com. So that is Schedulefly. Now let's get to Restaurant Owners Uncorked. And we have a special guest today that I'm very excited to talk to. And this will be a first for us to have somebody who runs a very large state restaurant association. So, Emily, thank you for joining today.
Yeah, of course.
And just, if you would, just introduce yourself.
Yeah, so Emily Williams Knight, and I feel really grateful. I get to lead the Texas Restaurant Association, and then we also have a nonprofit foundation which is focused on workforce development. And so we have about 58,000 restaurants across our great state. I think second to California, employing 1.4 million employees, largest private sector employer. And last year did just under $137 billion in sales. So quite an economic driver in our state for sure.
1.4 million employees, 58,000 restaurants there in Texas.
And growing. I mean, it's we have a population boom, as you know, and a lot of people in Texas like to eat out. The weather tends to be more seasonal year round versus closing. And with that growth, people need two things. They need food and they need shelter. And obviously we provide food. So it's really a great place. I'm sure we can get into all the reasons why you'd want to have a restaurant in Texas, but population and really great regulatory environment are two of them. And really our job is to protect that regulatory environment.
Protect that regulatory environment so it makes it easy to do business. Well, it's a hard business
Absolutely.
as it is. We don't need too many regulations. Running a restaurant is not easy.
That's exactly right. We get all the red tape we can to allow restaurant. I mean, I think our view is we want you to take great care of your employees and your guests. That's why you get into this business, right? You have a hospitality heart. You shouldn't be thinking about what's happening in Washington, what's happening at your state capital or your city, and you certainly shouldn't be running into brick walls or overregulation when you're just trying to feed people. And so I think we've done a amazing job for decades in Texas of really protecting, especially small businesses, and that continues today. And that doesn't happen just when Congress is in session and the Capitol is busy. It happens every single day. On every corner, there is someone with a great idea that wants to regulate restaurants, and our job is to allow the good ones to pass, which are good for public safety and health, and to stop all the what maybe someone sees as a good idea, but it's really a horrible idea for businesses, is to make sure those don't go through.
Yes. I call it business iatrogenics. So there's this medical term iatrogenics where it's doing harm while intending to do good, right? And
Yes, do no harm is definitely the
first do no harm, right?
yes.
And that's the challenge with a lot of the stuff that, they're well intended with the right oftentimes well intended, but with lack of understanding about the downstream effects, and sometimes or maybe oftentimes that some of that legislation might come from people that have never actually run a business and don't really understand
Yes.
how that, while maybe short term seems good, long term has really negative impacts.
Right. And if you're not there, right, what we say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, which sounds like a very simple term, but I'll give you just a great example. One session ago, a lawmaker who's very supportive of restaurants had an idea that the workforce, restaurants included, should be able to identify an overdose, opiate overdose or some type of drug overdose, and then administer Narcan. So you can imagine he's trying to help this fentanyl and every other problem we have in this country. But the idea for us that our restaurant employees would not only have to identify that, but then administer Narcan, take on the liability. There were so many problems with the idea. If we hadn't been there and they had not known to call the TRA, that would have gone through. And instead, we were able to advocate of why that wasn't a good idea and to carve restaurants out of that legislation. So I try to remind people that, not only do you have to understand what's happening and what the impact is to the business, but you also have to have the relationships. So the phone calls come in and you're actually actively with these lawmakers so you can say, hey, love, you're trying to protect public safety, that this is impossible to implement for restaurants and put so much risk on our employees. And we were able to carve restaurants out. And those examples are weekly, whether it be now at the federal level, obviously in Austin, and then across 254 counties we have to deal with. And believe it or not, the cities within those counties, et cetera, all have their own laws and rules. And so navigating that is a big part of what, the amazing team I'm able to lead. That's what we work on every single day.
A lot of phone calls, a lot of relationships, a lot. I mean,
Yes.
this is an intense thing. I mean, I wonder, is it, it just seems like nowadays things are harder to get done. We're more fractured. There's less conversation. There's more posturing online. Is that something that's impacted y'all, or have y'all been able to just continue to build the interpersonal relationships you need?
Yeah, we believe that everyone should love restaurants.
Yeah.
They're the heart of every community. They're the table where you bring people together. And so the head of public policy for our organization, Kelsey, is just extraordinary. And the two of us, I think, have led the organization and the board, which is so supportive of really you need both sides of the aisle, right? We don't pick and choose winners and losers, and that the only way you're going to get something done is if you work with, in this case, Republicans and Democrats in our state. Even if you are all Republican, right? All three chambers essentially. You got the Democrats are a very important part of what happens in Texas as well. And so I think the respectful way that we lead, the way that we don't decide who we want to work with, we decide with who we can bring forward. I think it's helped us a lot. And I think we've helped educate people. And, it started really in the pandemic when I was brand new. I'd never met the governor, I'd never been to our capital, and I didn't have a single relationship with a lawmaker. Imagine. And now I'm put in the seat with my team to lead us out of COVID. I didn't know which team people were on. I just knew I needed help. And to me, I even get goosebumps talking about it, right? It was the greatest lesson of we need everybody when there's a crisis. And so I didn't know I was calling an R or a D to get something done. I just got the help the industry needed. And I think that ability to just work with people, I think we're showing that more and more that we can't be the ones to bring people back together. It's far beyond us. But if we can demonstrate every day in the Capitol and with these lawmakers that, your political party maybe matter to you getting elected, but for us, we need everyone to care about restaurants because without us, we've proven again in the pandemic that you can't feed all Texans. We have a food crisis when there's a disaster. We cannot feed Texans without restaurants at 54% on the food dollar. Positioning us as a critical piece of feeding infrastructure like electricity and water changes the conversation and tends to bring people together. But we've got to rise above the rhetoric right now and just keep trying to get work done and protect these restaurants and their employees.
You were new during the pandemic.
Brand new, 6 months.
Where did you come from?
So I've a really strange, I say strange career. I've loved my career journey, but I was one of those in third grade that it was introduced to the hospitality industry through the show Hotel. Connie Selica, I was a military brat. We lived on a military base. Things were pretty the same, right? Everyone was the same. And I just dreamed watching that show Hotel in San Francisco that someday I would run a hotel like Connie Selica. I had dark hair. I just dreamed of being her. And I God, I wish I could meet her someday. And I decided that moment in third grade, I was going to go into hospitality. I was always the animal collector, the person in the neighborhood that organized kids to do good. And so I went from, helping to write books in the hospitality sector at Pearson Education. I cut my teeth at Pizza Hut and Marriott. I was a college president that had leading hospitality and culinary programs that we were able to expand around the world. And then I was in a job actually bringing international students to the US to some of our top universities. But I'd always been around hospitality and culinary. And it was really a number of people in the industry that called and said, hey, the CEO of Texas is going to retire. What do you think? And of course, I said, no, I don't want to do that. Right. I'm traveling the world. I'm building businesses. I'm bringing students. But there was just, I really go back. For me, it was a God. I think God knew the pandemic was coming. There was a storm coming, and He had prepared me my whole life to lead, and knew I cared about people, and He put me in that seat. And there's no doubt in my mind, it didn't make sense for me to take this job. I didn't expect to be here many, many years. Now coming up on 7 years. And I think the pandemic, that was my why I came here. And it's the greatest work I've ever done in my entire career.
What, tell me, okay, so you started in, I guess, in 19.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you really were hit.
Yeah, August 1st was my first official day. And by October, we started hearing about something happening in China. And then by December, things were really, and I remember I'd come out of managing a team in China. And so I was sort of getting, not firsthand, but I was able to maybe get a little more information about what I was hearing on the news. And then it was kind of a New York problem. And then I was actually in Washington for my first official visit to the Capitol when I was with, it was Congressman Crenshaw actually. And he missed the meeting because they were voting on the first coronavirus bill before anything really had happened. And I traveled home and I said to my husband, we were leaving on spring break. I was new in my job. And he said, listen, you need a break. You're exhausted. I was trying to learn the job. So I got up that morning and his chief of staff called and said, hey, Senator Cruz may have COVID. You might want, or coronavirus, you may want to quarantine. And I'm like, what? And I had met with him for like 30 minutes in his office with a group of board members. And I'm like, oh my God. If you remember, there was an incident where there was a party at the White House and a number of them thought they had been exposed. And so they immediately quarantined. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do the right thing. And I stayed home, 2 days and I was fine. So we flew to Cabo. And on day 2 of our Cabo vacation, the governor's deputy chief of staff called and said, hey, and this is exactly how it went. Hi, I'm new and I know you're brand new. He was 2 days in the job. And he said, I'm not sure what's about to happen, but if we work together, keep us out of the press. He goes, we'll get through this. And I'll never forget that olive branch. And frankly thinking, oh my God, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And so I moved my desk against the balcony so I could watch my family enjoy a couple more days of vacation. And we just started the process of first closing individual areas, which then turned into chaos, and then working with the governor's team to get us, closed on essentially St. Patrick's Day and then reopened May 1st, which was one of the earliest in the country. And so my job was just creating a war room with my team and learning the laws and, hearing about the PPP and shaping it and fixing it. And I mean, it was 20 hours a day. And there were times we would sleep at our desks because we were just people. The fear was something I'll never forget, right? The fear of a loss, the fear of watching small businesses close. But I knew our only hope was to help them navigate through because there was no playbook. And so if we built the playbook as we went, we would not have as many restaurants lose their livelihoods. I mean, these are small businesses. This is their personal income often, personal investment. And so we figured it out. We wrote the rules. We got us reopened. We worked on the PPP Flexibility Act to get more money into the restaurants, the RRF. I mean, I just go back to it. And it was just reduce loss, right? Just reduce loss. Try to save as many as you can. We kind of went with that starfish philosophy, right? If there's a billion starfish on the beach and you're throwing one at a time in and someone's like, you're wasting your time. And it was like, for us, it was for every one we get back in the water, there's, a business saved, an employee's job saved. And so it was very meaningful to the team and I, and we don't talk about it a lot anymore because I think we get emotional still, but
Yeah.
it was, I just wish people really knew. I mean, they point fingers and I wish they knew just how hard that was and how nobody knew what to do. We just used our best instincts, really.
I love the tossing starfish story because
Yeah.
it's the little girl tossing a starfish, and the guy
Mhm.
says, you know, why? What are you doing? Well,
Yep.
these starfish have washed up, and I don't want them to die, so I'm throwing them back.
Yep.
And he looks down the beach, and he's like, yeah, but there's like thousands and thousands of these things for miles. I can see
Yeah.
all the way down the beach. Like what you're doing doesn't really matter. And she tosses it, and she says, it mattered to that one. And then
That's
he's like,
exactly right.
hmm. So then he starts tossing, and then somebody sees him. What are y'all doing? And then and then everybody, and then all of a sudden, all the starfish get tossed back in by. I
And don't
love.
we need more of that in life?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I use that starfish example a lot, and I think that man, I just got chills, you know, because I think of what y'all were doing and how much that mattered to each individual business that you were helping, and how many people were probably inspired by and motivated by the leadership to, you know, pull together to help. Because restaurants, I mean, I remember it, you know, gosh,
Oof.
every customer we had, you know, closed their doors, and
Right.
you know, like figuring out like what's going to happen, and they were terrified. You know, I mean, our customers are all they're
You're all
small,
small, but yeah, those are your bread.
right?
That's the bread and butter of the industry, right? I mean, like 90% of our restaurants in Texas are considered small businesses. And so those were the ones without a lifeline. There was no economies of scale, there were no major supply chain resources. It was just try to survive, right? Sell alcohol, sell toilet paper, sell barbecue. Like
Yes.
I mean, it was the innovation and the grit by these people. And I tell people today, I'll still run into people that will say, "Can I just hug you? We've never met, but you were my North Star. You and your TRA team were my North Star in the pandemic." And what was interesting is that we didn't know anybody. So we were just pushing out every day. I would do a video every night before I went to bed. Sometimes, my pajamas on, I admit, right? A baseball hat, like, "Hey guys, got this update from the feds. This is what's happening." But it was like they knew us intimately. My children were in middle school. They're running in and out. We had a puppy in the middle of the chaos. And we all lived it together. So I think there was an advantage of just being humble and not saying you had the answers, but saying, once I know, I'm going to get it out to you quickly and you're going to be able to trust it. And so for me, there's some reminder of that, of how the industry came together and how we worked together. We need to get back to a little more of that. That made us stronger for sure. And, we know people love restaurants and they supported restaurants like no tomorrow in the pandemic. And we need to get back to that sense of the community table. I really believe that.
It's interesting how it's you know, sometimes a crisis makes us remember the things that are the most important and pull together like that, which is unfortunate. So uh what what are the biggest challenges that your members are facing right now? Because there's a lot of them. I mean, there's everything from like, what do we do about these tariffs to, you know, inflation, rising labor and food costs, the consumer, you know, maybe,
Immigration.
I mean, immigration. Like, what are the things that, I mean, I know you've got like thousands of things you'll have to deal with, but like, what are the
Yeah.
top few that like you're really locked in on right now that you think, you know, could have a material impact on your members?
Yeah. I think we kind of summarize all of this, right? Is just the uncertainty. There's no predictability in the business right now. And that uncertainty is driving a lot of loss, either full business loss, revenue loss, margin loss. I mean, it's just there is not, you get up every day and if you're in, let's really focus on the small business. You can't predict anymore what's going to happen. You
Yeah.
can't predict that the lunch crowd that you had last year is going to be the same lunch crowd as this year. So all these uncontrollables are just not providing the line of sight you need to run a business that already has, on average, right, 4 to 6% margin, 2 weeks of cash on hand. The uncontrollables are what's killing us right now. And unfortunately, usually an uncontrollable, you think about it as an external or internal factor. But the external factors, you mentioned tariffs, right? Tariffs really haven't impacted us yet. We're waiting on, potentially, you know, I say this is Emily's opinion, not the TRA. I think that the IEPA tariffs, which were really around the fentanyl, may be overturned, right? That's great. However, we know there's other ways that the president will use to reapply tariffs. It will just take much longer because Congress will need to act. So we may have a little short-term relief there. However, a lot of manufacturers are already adding a tariff onto equipment because they're uncertain of what's going to happen. And we know a majority of our equipment is bought in China and Southeast Asia. So I think there's that uncertainty on the tariff piece isn't around food as much, maybe a little around European wines at 15%, but the general tariffs really have not impacted us yet. USMCA protects most of our agriculture, meat coming in from Canada and Mexico. But what might happen is hurting us. Immigration. I just got the report, and I'll show you. It came out this morning, or I'll read it to you. But let's see here, 19,000 job losses in the hospitality and leisure sector in September. 22,000 overall, 32,000 overall. So 19,000 were us. Well, that's a direct immigration impact. So the simplest way I try to explain it to people is that people think about immigration as losing the cook in the restaurant. We think about immigration and what we're facing is from the plant it, pick it, pack it, ship it, cook it, right? That entire value chain is being disrupted. That is leading to higher prices. There is no doubt that will lead to higher prices if we don't get that under control. However, is immigration something that we're going to solve in the next 6 months? No. So we sort of have two levers we're trying to pull. One is to think about long-term immigration reform, but in the meantime, really convince the White House that we need a worker permit, right? Those employees that have been here for a long period of time, paying taxes, contributing to the economy with no criminal record, give them amount of time to stay and work. Because with the big, beautiful bill impact, October 1st, you're going to see many more resources put towards enforcement, and that's going to continue to impact us. So I think that immigration is something long-term we must think about. We're 22% of our workforce in Texas and I would say probably extrapolate that to the nation, 20+% are immigrants. So we got to have a plan. I think the cost of protein is a huge concern. Meat prices are not going to come down, in particular beef, until at least 2028. As I've said, and I'm from Connecticut, so I'm not a rancher, but it's like however long it takes to grow a cow, right? Whatever that process is, that doesn't happen overnight. And so when you try to replenish these herds, get them through the system, put them in the feedlot for however long it is, slaughter that, pack it, move it, you're talking about 2028 until you see expected beef prices to come down. So for a lot of restaurants, that center of the plate protein, huge problem. And what I would say people need to keep on their radar is all seafood and fish. The import rules are changing. It's going to be highly impactful, things like crab, specific fish. A lot of countries applied to continue to service us. They were denied for either animal rights issues or safety issues, whatever those parameters are. But you're going to see a pretty big reduction in the amount of seafood supply internationally. We do not have enough domestically to make up the difference. And so I think when you talk about food costs, there are political things happening, in particular around seafood, and then issues around cattle that you can't fix. So you're just going to have to take that cost on. And let's be clear, how much more can you pass to the consumer? I think that's a big challenge for us.
What is it? So 2028 for what will
Yeah.
cause the prices to change in 2028, and what's led to this
Yeah.
increase?
So I think there's a lot of opinions. And so I would say it's like death by a thousand cuts. I think there's on the cattle side, you have that when we were in the pandemic, and then we had the opportunity to replace cattle and you had a lot of feed issues. You had the cost, remember, of feed going up for cattle and the prices dropping. And so it wasn't advantageous financially for ranchers to replace those herds. So they would sell them off. They did not replace them. Now, as they begin to replace them, you have a 2 to 3 year cycle until that cattle is ready for slaughter, that cow, right? That herd. So you're going to have a backlog just from the reduction in herd. I think it was last year we had the lowest number of cattle in America than we've had in 25 years. So
Hmm.
in order to catch up, you're going to have to take a number of years to catch up. In the meantime, you have import sources at risk because of the screwworm. And so the screwworm out of Mexico and that impact to their herds is going to be directly impacted to us. And although we're not tariffed, if there's less coming in or we're unable due to risk of screwworms impacting our herds, you're not going to actually import that meat from Mexico. You've got a 50% tariff on any beef coming from Brazil, right? And so that's when I say to people, it's not like, let's just fix tariffs, let's just fix immigration, let's just fix the labor supply, right? They all actually intersect in a meaningful way. They're not independent of each other. And so I think when you think about beef, there's really nothing we can do in the short term except for try to increase supply. But if that supply is coming in externally and it's tariffed at a high rate, you still have no relief for that restaurant. And I was talking with a big national member yesterday who said, but Emily, then we're selling like maybe a smaller petite filet, but with seafood. But now, if seafood is at risk, in particular crab and other species of fish internationally, you're not going to have that in order to complete that plate, right? So I think that's where we work very hard because the fish is a legislative issue. And so we're working really hard behind the scenes, and our partnership with the National Restaurant Association, who are in these conversations every day, becomes so critical. We can't drive as an association more consumers to eat, right? We're not a consumer facing organization. So right now we're doubling down on how can we help restaurants save money because there isn't anywhere else for them to go, right? I mean, I think if you just pulled up a small operator, they would say to you, I don't have anywhere else I can cut. My cleaning supplies are up, my insurance is up, my rent is up. You know, we worked on property taxes, there's some relief there. My labor is up. I can't, in some case, get all the product I need. And if I do, it's more expensive. And by the way, I don't think I can continue raising prices. That consumer is switching to grocery. I got to keep them engaged. What do I do? And so I think our operators are just under so much stress, and yet the consumer is demanding a great experience and value. So those two things are colliding right now. And listen, I get our big chains can do a lot. They have a lot to maneuver with. Anytime we're in moments like this, I'm deeply concerned about our smaller restaurants and how do we insert things like artificial intelligence, and how do we do things to help them take some of those tasks that are human led and get people back to delivering a great service so they keep their customer traffic while they navigate which could be a year or two of disruption.
Hmm. It's tough, man.
And complex, right? It's complex. And yet people are going out to eat, right? And people love restaurants. The sentiment of there was a question on a survey recently that would you rather reduce your cell phone plan or stop eating out? And people were willing to not replace their cell phone or reduce their plan if they were still able to eat out. So the good news is restaurants aren't going anywhere. The challenge is how does the model have to evolve to keep it where it's still a profitable small business that is incredibly successful. That's where we're at. And how do we use some of the new technology innovations, policy, tax reform, and the big, beautiful bill to help incentivize these small businesses to grow? Why these external factors, frankly, they're a challenge. They really are.
Yeah, they're a big challenge. What are you seeing? More restaurants closing, fewer restaurants opening?
Yeah, we've seen a little bit on the restaurant. We had the only state, I believe, in 24 that had positive unit growth, right? So we opened more than we closed. I think what we are seeing is we are seeing a little bit of a slowdown in openings, but that's also due to just construction costs, what it's going to cost to actually open that, the availability of equipment, if any of that equipment is tariffed, right? There's some risk there, but I think in general we are seeing more close, and I think and we need to do a little more research, but I extrapolate out is that when we hit the pandemic, 19, we were coming out of some gangbuster years for restaurants, right? So we had
Right.
healthy P&Ls. A lot of these businesses took on a lot of debt in the pandemic. They might have got the restaurant relief fund, they may have had PPP, but many took on small disaster loans. They took on, put more money in the business. So their P&L coming in the last year and a half wasn't as healthy, potentially, a small business. So what we're hearing from them directly, right, is that like, Emily, I've just run out of runway. Or, what's funny, and it's not funny, but what people forget is that some of these operators are tired, right?
Yeah.
They're saying, I've been in this business 30 years, Emily, I'm out. Like, I'm done. Like, I have nothing else to give. And I can't look down the runway and see that it's going to be any better. And so
Mm.
and that's where we have to fight harder because so many of these are those local independent community restaurants that support their baseball team where you go to have your engagement dinner. You can't lose those. That's the vibrancy of our restaurant scene.
Yeah.
That's where the greatest risk is right now for us.
Yeah, and any great community is only great in part because of the local independent restaurants.
Absolutely.
Like it's you can't name any small town, big city, whatever, and say that it's a great place, when you start peeling back, well, why is it great? There's always these awesome, independently owned, unique restaurants that
So
are there
special.
that are like the heart of the community. And those folks give. I mean, I have so much respect for all restaurant owners, but particularly just, the independent restaurant owner who gives. I get it. They are tired. They give blood, sweat, tears, love, passion, everything they've got to their
Amazing.
communities. Oftentimes, it's a labor of love for really small margins. And so part of it is sharing. I mean, look, this is why we do this podcast, like
Yeah.
we sharing their stories, because you know it, I know it. Most people that don't know restaurants don't really understand, what it takes. I mean, it seems like this cool thing, and restaurant owners have this great gig and this great life, and I mean, and there's parts of it that are great, but it is a grind. It is really
It's
hard.
a grind.
It's a often in some ways thankless, but I always say that restaurant owners are like they're almost like first responders, because anytime you have a natural disaster or something like that, all of your first responders are there, but then who's right there with them are restaurant owners who they're setting up shop, they're giving away food, they're donating, food, they're giving time,
They are
money.
the most
Like
generous
it's like
people.
incredibly.
I don't, I will fight to the mat for a restaurant owner and frankly, the employees, because they are the most humble, kind, giving. They have chosen, people say to me a lot, Emily, they always ask two questions. Would you go into politics? Absolutely not. And would you open a restaurant? Absolutely not. And I say that with all the humility in the world, because
Yeah.
what they do every day, I mean, you imagine you are dealing with a human being coming into a place. You have no understanding of what their day or their life is like. You have to meet them where they are. You have to give them an incredible experience with variables that you don't control. You're a magic maker, you're a theater, you're an actor, an actress, right? You are, and yet you're running all the complexities of making that special. And even if you do everything right and it's not perfect, you may not get that guest to come back. Talk about a bar that you have to have the grit and the drive and the energy to show up every day to try to make someone's life a little better. And I don't think they get the respect that they deserve, which is one of the reasons my team and I work so hard on their behalf, is to what you just said, Will, educate lawmakers, educate the media, and educate and you talk about disasters. I had a last week at my board meeting, I was able to sit down with Rob Wilder, who he and Jose Andres started World Central Kitchen, and you listen to the power of food. They are feeding 300,000 people a day in war-torn parts of the world, right? The idea of what food can do. And you
Mm.
sit back and say, those were restaurant folks that thought of that. Because when the ice storm hits, who do you call? When Uvalde, we were on the ground with World Central Kitchen, our restaurants feeding on day one. In the floods, who shows up first? Restaurants, to your point. And so I think this is when I know people are, "Yeah, Emily, we don't have any money either. We can't go out. It's too expensive." It's like everyone can go out and buy a slice of pie, right? You can somehow go and see that local restaurant, because I do think if we don't get some relief, you are going to see more of those very special restaurants close. We're going to do everything we can, but we really need the consumers to visit them and dine with them, and even just buy a $20 gift card if you can't eat. Do something to help make sure they know that that restaurant matters in your community. That is something that everybody can do, even $5, to make sure that that restaurant knows, and we get them through this period of uncertainty, because we can't lose them. You just can't lose them.
Mm. Boy, I love the passion and respect you have for these folks, Emily. It's palpable, contagious, and it's inspiring. So, you are incredibly well suited for what you do, clearly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
God's work. It really is.
Thank you for doing well. Look, I mean, yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like,
Mhm.
I mean, this is not where you thought you'd be, and here you are, and your authentic um care is comes across just so well. I think there's a lot of people that um, talk. a good game and can say the right words, I can tell 100% that you believe this to your core, and I'm very
Oh, I
grateful
do.
for
And I
you.
really do. I go back. I mean, I'm later in my career, right? Probably my last role. Um, I think back to those days of watching Hotel, and it sounds silly, but having a career that spanned educating feature culinary arts, traveling the world, building schools with the best team in the world at Kendall College, to writing textbooks, to working at Pizza Hut, right out of college, being humbled by that experience and seeing how hard our workforce works. Like, you look at your career and you think, how did I get here? Didn't imagine that. But then you think about the impact that you can make. And as you get later in life, the impact is what matters. And so to me, surrounding myself with a team, I get to do a lot of the public facing, but I have a team behind me that cares just as deeply. And we say, we're courageous and pragmatic. So we like to be courageous and talk about issues people don't want to talk about and we want to fight, but we also want to be pragmatic. We want to bring really simple solutions to complex problems. I think sometimes we get really stuck in trying to solve immigration is one solve, and we're like, no, let's Congress do its work here, but let's get work permits, right? Let's break this down and really try to get to the root of the problem. And I know that I know that if you are not in this conversation, if you are not fighting every day and you are not supporting these restaurants, there would be so many terrible regulations because it's very easy. It's ubiquitous, right? If you have a good idea as a lawmaker, let's try it on the restaurants. There's one in every corner, there's one in every district. Every lawmaker probably has 100. And it just, for some reason, it always defaults to the restaurant industry. And so if you're not there, we've seen in other states what can happen. We've seen the FAST Act, we've seen what they've done to businesses in other states across the country. And you can't allow that to happen. And so the only way to do that is to show up, build relationships, and fight like hell, with some sense of humility and grace, if you can. And sometimes even I struggle with that, but that's our job. That's what we're here for.
Um, so the members of the Texas Restaurant Association are, and you mentioned 58,000
Yeah,
restaurants.
we represent 58,000, and they're a cross section of national companies that are part of the National Association. So think about a Brinker, a Darden.
Uh-huh.
And so
Okay.
there are units in Texas we help protect, franchisees, and then the majority of our members are independents. So they're single units, two, three, four, five units. They pay a membership fee and they, contribute to our advocacy fund. And then we always say like the advocacy is what it is the difference maker, but we've really moved into this area of how to help them be better operators, right? How do you bring them insurance or workers' compensation or healthcare for their employees at scale through the association's buying power and bring that back to those restaurants at a much more affordable rate? And then we do a lot of education, right? So someone just brought a service dog in my restaurant. What do I do? We've done multiple immigration webinars. How do you make sure you're complying with the law? Like, so the information side of helping the operators is almost as important and growing as fast. It is the advocacy side. So we play both. And we think if we can make and help you be a great operator, that feeds into our ability to keep passing great laws, which then keeps that operator open. So it's like a cyclical circle for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, okay. What else is on your mind? Anything else we should talk about? I mean, I could talk
I
all
think,
day.
I think I'm just grateful that we met. And I think, you are such a good example of keeping a solution simple. And I think what I find and what worries me sometimes is that when we're in more of a crisis point or we're in a place where restaurants are sort of grabbing for solutions to make the P&L better, sometimes they're either oversold a complex system or they insert something that doesn't work with everything else they do. Or frankly, I call put a rocket on a turtle, right? And you don't need to do that. And
Yeah.
so to me, we need more of these very simple solutions to solve a problem and not make operators' lives more difficult. I think that if I foreshadow ahead, I think as I think about our policy work, one of the things we've got to tackle for small restaurants is swipe fees. The average restaurant's paying 3 to 4% on that credit card. We've had a great hearings last session. We are trying to remove the credit card fees from taxes and tips. You, a restaurant owner, are collecting the taxes for the state of Texas. You're required to. You're paying a swipe fee on that. That's insanity. It's criminal, in my opinion. So that's a lot of the work we're doing is some of those, things like swipe fees. How do we make that more transparent? We're hearing a lot on delivery, a lot of chargeback issues, a lot of penalty issues. And so we want to sit down with the delivery companies and try to come to a compromise and figure out how do we make that better for our restaurants. Let's see if we can create a win-win. If not, we go the policy route.
Wait, explain that. So what's happening with deliveries?
Yeah, so we're hearing a lot of noise, and it's noise right now. That's where our job is to go in and figure it out. And the noise really is around chargeback. So customer says, orders through a delivery company, you fill that order, it gets to the customer and the burger's missing. And it could be the delivery driver ate it, it could be the restaurant forgot it. Oftentimes, when the restaurant checks it, tapes the bag, it went out a different way. That restaurant every single time is liable for that. So those chargebacks are killing restaurants. And the process right now is not transparent. And so that's number one. Two is there's a lot of penalties, lack of transparent penalties. So I sign up with you, you're marketing my program. I increase my burger 50 cents because I'm not making any money with the fees. Now you're charging me a fee of $8, which wasn't disclosed because I broke some marketing agreement that I didn't even know existed. And so the stacking of penalties on small businesses is very problematic. And again, our job is the delivery companies are partners of ours, meaning that they are part of this value chain to the consumer. So we always like to sit first and talk through, hey, this is what we're hearing. These are the these are the issues that our restaurants are bringing forward. Same with swipe fees. And if we can't come to a compromise, then we go the legislative route and we get protections for our restaurants against things like chargebacks and swipe fees and et cetera. So I think on the delivery side, it's something that's been bubbling up for several months. And so we'll go out and do roundtables. We'll hear from our members, and then we'll sit down with those delivery companies and say, hey, here's the evidence. This is what we're hearing. It's not sustainable for our restaurants. Can we figure something out together? Or do we have to go and try to pass policy and fight each other out in the Capitol to take care of, but our first approach as an association is always to try to get a compromise before we have to go the legislative route. And if we can't, that's the route we go. But I think, the swipe fees are really hurting small businesses big time, and Texans. I was out in Fredericksburg and I stopped in 3 different places. Each place I paid the credit card fee. They're like 3.5% if you use your credit card, you're paying. And I think the only way to get reform is if every single business starts saying it's going back to every Texan. And then maybe our state will wake up and say, hey, this is unfair. Why am I paying $1,700 as a Texan every year for the privilege of using my credit card? So we probably should pause on that topic, because you can tell my voice is changing and I'm getting very angry
So
because it's so unfair.
so the restaurants are passing on those fees to the consumer.
Oh, right now, many are not.
Yeah.
There's some legal, you can pass it on. It has to be very disclosed. But then you're really pushing that on the consumer, right? And that's every Texan's taking that burden too. But it feels like the only way to wake up our legislatures for them to see that, okay, the business isn't going to pay this. The consumer's using the card. Let's push it to them. And then perhaps when people realize they're paying thousands of dollars a year, they may realize this is an unfair market, especially when you look globally at Europe and Canada. We pay the highest in the world. That seems very unfair to me as businesses. So
we pay the highest credit card fees
by far, in some cases,
by
3,
far.
4, or 5 times what other countries pay for the privilege of
Really?
using the credit card.
With the
Yeah.
privilege of using a credit card when you almost have to nowadays anyway. I
Yeah.
mean, we're
Well, listen, we're being very creative. We're looking at alternatives like stablecoin. Stablecoin is pegged, for example, in the US to the US dollar. As that marketplace opens, it costs 0.01 to run a stablecoin card. Might be an option. So, we're gonna, that's some of the things that, we fight the day to day, but we're already thinking about all the policy that we need to work on when the session comes back in a year and a half and what we're working on federally. But if there's things like stablecoin that could reduce the ability, right, and that credit card space, then we need to figure out how to make those laws work for stablecoin. So we're always trying to think ahead about what are those pinch points of a restaurant, and one is credit card swipe fees. You have restaurants paying $1 million a year in swipe fees that are non-negotiable because it's a monopoly. It's a duopoly, right? It's a Visa and MasterCard. There's no other choice.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's a
Mhm.
big one. That's a big policy point. Chargebacks is a big policy point. And then on the employee side, it's continuing our really good work in childcare. We feel really strongly that we're onto something with the business community leading the childcare work. Our employees cannot come work for us if they have nowhere safe and affordable to put their child. It's an
Yeah.
economic
Huge issue.
issue. It's
Yeah.
not a social issue. I'm thankful Kelsey is passionate. She's actually a new mom herself, and she has formed with three other organizations something called the Employers for Child Care Task Force. 8 out of 9 bills were passed this session, and it's just getting started. But we need the business community to say, this is our problem. We've got to create a solution. The solution is not businesses just pay for childcare. It's not the solution. But what creative things can we do to make this marketplace better so your server can put their child somewhere safe and come work for you? Right now, the math just doesn't work for our industry.
You mentioned using your scale to help with things like health insurance. Talk about health insurance because that's getting ready to go up again.
It
Uh,
is, yeah. So the biggest, a lot of what's interesting is those employers that are mandated under Obamacare to offer health care, they get very little uptake from our employees, which I think is an interesting fact, right? Because it's something people throw out like, oh, restaurant jobs, no health care. The large restaurants that are required to offer it, very few employees take it. And so we took a giant step back and said, is there another way? And so a lot of times what you need, right, is basic health care. You need, I got a cold, I have allergies, I cut my finger, I have a rash, I have a burn, right? I twisted my ankle. Like there's, that I call it first frontline healthcare. And so we did a partnership with Teladoc. And for $9 a month, you and your entire family have Teladoc. We issue prescriptions, you can get basic care, and that's for the employee and their family. And the employer can simply offer that to every employee. And so we're trying to think about one of the core components, of course, of our industry is also the need for mental health. And so mental health care is covered within that Teladoc plan. So if you're struggling, if you need that mental health care, if you need to talk to someone, right? If you're dealing with a lot, what I like to say about the restaurant industry is we'll meet you as your high school job, a midlife crisis job, an end of life job and career, or you stay with us your entire career, right? We meet you where you are. But oftentimes we have employees that may be struggling with issues. And so having mental health care coverage is something that we're passionate about as an organization. And so through Teladoc, at just $9 a month, you can offer that to your employees and it covers them and their family. So if your daughter is not feeling well, you get a Teladoc appointment and get medicine. Maybe you can go to work. And so it's these little solutions. I don't think there's a silver bullet, but it's trying to think about what are some of the things that we can bring to employees. I'm very passionate about trying to find a financial wellness, solution where I can get basic financial literacy into our employees' hands. Something I think we're just so missing as a country, but also within our industry is can we offer some type of, it's not, I'm a Dave Ramsey. I happen to like that model because, I was in the military wife at one point, but what is that we can do to kind of teach our employees and give them some basic knowledge on financial literacy, right? There's other things we're looking at to try to enhance the employee experience without simply saying to the employer, hey, here's a suite of benefits that you cannot afford in your business model. Go do it or bust. We think there may be a different way. And so we're trying to test out some of these ideas to see how do we continue to take better care of employees without breaking the model, which would allow the business to close. That's kind
yeah.
of where we're at.
Um, why is it that the employees don't like when they offer health insurance? Why are they not participating?
I don't know. I mean, a little bit's cost, a little bit's age. Our younger employees tend not to ever take it.
Yeah.
Some of the more transient that are working multiple jobs or, and I think a lot of times it comes down to cost at the end of the day. I mean, if you're really just margins are thin and, whether it be the industry or, I reflect a lot. My brother is a UPS driver. It's a great offset for me because you need to remain connected to what I call the working person every day. And I sat down with him once. He's my big brother, and I'm like, do the math, but let's go. And I just went down what his bills were. And I'm like, there's nothing left. He's got a daughter, he's got, and it's sort of like, wow. And so that's humbling. It's like it's grounding, I think. And that's why I think even if we offer a $99 a month health plan or $120 for comprehensive health care to one of our restaurant workers, that's not sustainable. But it's not just restaurants, it's so many industries. And so that's where the idea, Joe on my team said, let's go explore Teladoc because a lot of it's the frontline care that people need, that immediate, quick, We've talked to CVS, Doc in the Box, and so we're always trying to figure out. But our role is really to protect the restaurants, right? That's our mission. But we sort of see it as if you don't also help the employees the best you can, you don't have a restaurant. And so we see it as we have to prioritize the restaurant, but if we can make sure those employees like childcare and basic healthcare coverage, that's going to keep that employee retained and that's going to
Yeah.
make that restaurant more successful.
Yep. Absolutely. Financial literacy too. My gosh, that is a big issue.
Oh, just the basics, and I say that because I mean, this is embarrassing, right? I won't even mention my undergrad alma mater, but when I came out, a guy came to our house because they knock on the doors of military housing. I'd married my husband who was a military service member and sold us, what was it, like a annuity or no, whole life insurance.
Yeah.
I had no idea. And then wanted me to put a little money in the stock market. And yet I was terrified of the stock market. And I was 22 years old. And I'll never forget that feeling and thinking about, but now I look back and realize that education at 22, 23 was transformational for where I am now in my 50s, right? So I feel like there is something about teaching, especially our workforce,
Yeah.
basic financial management. I'm just
Absolutely.
personally passionate about it.
Love it. Emily, this has been great. I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to have you
Yeah,
on
well,
this
thank you.
show.
I'm so glad you asked me.
I, I hope that other states are doing even a half of the job that you are, because you're
Oh,
just
they are. I have incredible colleagues, and you know what? They all deal with different issues. My good
yeah
friend in California, Jot, right? I have a very different landscape to work with, and I'm humbled
yeah
by his work every day. But I would say this, if you're a restaurant listening, engage with your state association. They can offer you so much good that you don't even know, right? You have a permitting problem and you're spending 8 extra months, right? Call your restaurant association, become a member, connect with others, go to their mixers, find out what they have on immigration. They're working so hard for you every day. You just need to join. It's pennies on the dollar when you look at what you get back. And so I guess that would be my one recommendation is that we do have great state restaurant associations and our national association, if they're a large brand, they really can make a huge difference for you.
love it. Fantastic. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you.
all for listening, for watching. Please give us a rating. We love ratings when we get a little 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps the algorithms know to put this kind of phenomenal content in front of more people. Emily, I'm going to wrap this. Do you have like 3 minutes for me to ask you a couple of quick questions when
Oh
we?
yeah, absolutely. Yep, I got 5 minutes.
Cool. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. More coming soon. See ya.
Thank you.